Natalie, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Natalie, one of the reasons why we were so excited to get you on the podcast is that you are basically everything teens.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so I know that there's probably a million people out there right now asking, why teenagers? Why did you do this, Natalie? Tell me about this calling towards teenagers.
That's really funny. Yeah, I always kind of joke about how it takes a special type of personality to want to hang out with teenagers all day. But honestly, I think it's because when I was a teenager, I really struggled with confidence. And just having somebody to talk to other than mom or dad was very helpful for me. And I think teenagers are funny. They're quirky. They'll do anything for food. And I love that about them. And so I actually just really love my work. And I think teenagers are at such a pivotal age because they're so malleable. Like, they're so easily influenced. And if they can have positive influences, it's very powerful. And I always kind of laugh because I feel like I say a lot of the things that maybe mom or dad might say or my other coaches do. And coming from them, it's, crazy. Mom and dad, how could you possibly understand? You don't know what you're talking about. But coming from somebody else, it's the most brilliant thing they've ever heard. And so I just kind of use that to my advantage because if I can be a positive voice for a teenager or one of my other coaches can, then I feel like we've won because our teenagers need so many positive voices right now.
Absolutely. I always joke, but to be completely honest, when I'm in clinic, they actually are my favorite population to work with
Mhm.
because I can do some of the play stuff. I'm a registered play therapist. I can do some of that stuff with them. They're still playful,
Sure.
yet there's also depth. So I can also sit down and have these really deep conversations, but there's this wonderful emerging creativity from my teens.
Yes. It's a fun mix, isn't it? A lot of my
It
students
really
still
is.
like the fidgets or they'll like some of our activities that I think, is this a little juvenile? And they're like, no, I love this. So yeah, it's a really great age to work with.
Absolutely. So, how did your agency, Success for Teens, get started? What was the genesis of it?
Yeah, good question. So I still work as a school psychologist in a public high school, which means that I am part of a team of people, including special education teachers and speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, and we do assessments for students who have something getting in the way of their learning. So whether that's a learning disability or maybe ADHD, some type of emotional disturbance, or a combination thereof. I work with that team of people to figure out what's getting in the way of that teenager being successful in school. And then part of my job is to help put that support in place or connect them with resources within our district or outside of our district. And I love that job. It's why I still do it. However, there is so much report writing, so much red tape that I have to go through or hoops to jump through in order to get a teenager what they need. And sometimes, if I'm going to be honest, the district where I work and many other districts don't have the specific resources or skills or people that are needed for a teenager to find success. And so that frustration led me to start a very official Google search about what else can I do with a school psychology degree because I wasn't able to make the connections I wanted with students. It was just test one and move on to the next one. Test, test, test. Maybe I'd make some relationships along the way or somebody would come back to see me every once in a while if we clicked. But I wasn't able to see teens through their ups and downs and their struggles. And I really wanted to be a part of that process and a part of their story. So when I found academic life coaching, I was thrilled because it was a nice blend of the school psychology training that I already had, but also some positive psychology, some working on, building confidence or executive function skills. And a lot of that I found that I was kind of doing just naturally in my work. So I was thrilled to find out that I can actually, be trained in this and learn even more skills to share with teenagers. So that's how I started. It was just me originally coaching anybody who would give me access to their teenager. I remember sending out
I
an
love it.
email saying, like, dear friends and
I'm
family, I'm
here.
doing this. Yeah, please send me your teenagers and I will help them. And it was great, but then, I mean, this is a good problem to have, but the need was so great that I couldn't do it on my own. Especially at that time, I had two young children under 3, and I was still working as a school psychologist. And so a couple of my friends and colleagues started saying, hey, we see what you're doing. This sounds appealing. Can we coach also? So it's just kind of evolved over time. And now we are a team of 12. So we are school psychologists, intervention specialists, guidance counselors, general ed teachers, social workers who do this work outside of working in schools so that we have a different way to connect with teens and so we can see their progress over time. So it's been fun. It's been a journey. I love it.
Yep. Yeah, so important. I love it. And I love that you are servicing a population that desperately needs extra
Yeah.
supports and understanding and care. So, Natalie, one of the things that you mentioned there was executive functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for many of us, when we think about our teens, we think about sometimes this feeling of the emerging adult who still struggles with a messy room and
Yes.
homework that is crumpled at the bottom of the school bag or getting assignments in time. Could you talk to our listeners a little bit about why our kiddos really struggle, or why our teens struggle with organizational skills? What's going on here? Where's the
Yeah.
disconnect?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I kind of have a two-pronged answer for that. So the first thing that comes to mind is that teenagers look like mini adults, right? And sometimes we expect that a teenager should just be able to manage their time well, or organize their room or their book bag, or have effective study skills. But oftentimes those skills are not explicitly taught either at home or at school, or you might think that they're being taught and they're not really. And so sometimes it's a skill deficit, or it's an expectation that because they look like little adults or functioning adults, that they should already know how to do that. Or, they're 16, they should be able to fill in the blank. And sometimes just naturally that occurs with maturity and learning, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes that skill needs to be explicitly taught. And the other thing that comes to mind is that teenagers are at a time in their life where they are deciding what is important to them and what matters to them. And it could be a plethora of different things. But in the moment, sometimes, a messy room is not at the top of their priority list because of all of the things that happened to them earlier that day that mom and dad may know about or may not know about. And I think sometimes that figuring out of like, what is my priority right now, or what is important, what do I want to spend my time and energy on, is not always the same thing that the adults think they should be working on. The adults know that these are important skills and they have to know them at some point in order to be functioning adults. But I think the pressure that parents feel to teach these skills and have these skills before they leave the nest or leave the house feels more pressure filled and greater or heavier than what the teenager is feeling. So there's that disconnect there.
I love that. Yeah, complete misalignment where we're going, but why aren't they doing this?
Yeah.
But it's just not up there for them. It's not a priority. Yeah, I think for me, I found it so empowering when I truly started to understand that that prefrontal cortex is developing all the way through the teen.
Yes.
It isn't really fully developed for many of our kiddos until close to their 30s. So, very often we look and we go, you should be doing this, but that part of the brain, it's still developing. The lights are still coming on.
Yes. And I totally agree with you. And I also feel as though they have to see what's in it for them. Like, if I clean my room or if I start my project earlier, how does this reduce my stress, or how does this make me feel better? And sometimes they can't see that without some support or help or even on their own. And so I'm always trying to think of like, what's in it for my teenager? How do we get them to buy in to see this importance?
Okay, so let's go with
Mm-hmm.
an example here, because I think this is the major
Mm-hmm.
question that so many parents have here. So if there is a misalignment and I do need them to do their homework, they do need to pick up all their clothes on the floor, how do we get that buy-in? Can we work with an example? Let's say it's a messy bedroom. How do we get that buy-in with
Yeah.
them? What do you
Yeah.
suggest?
So I always suggest is to really break down any task into very small bite-sized pieces. So if you're expecting your teenager to clean their room and you say to them, I'd like you to clean your room, you might get a lot of pushback. But if you can break that down into just one small step, maybe it's let's get all the dishes out of your room and put them in the dishwasher. And if you can get them to do one small step, that feeling of, okay, I've kind of started might get the ball rolling, because sometimes it's just the getting started that is the hard part. And then you also want to say, like, okay, dishes are out of your room. Like, how does that feel to be in a room with no dirty dishes? Hopefully the answer is, oh, it feels a little better. Like, I can walk around in my room without stepping on a fork or worrying about, tripping over a glass. But I think even kind of encouraging them to pick what is one small thing that you can do. I'm not going to ask you to clean your entire room right now. Can you do one thing for me? And then if you're feeling up to it, great, let's do one more. But to try to break it down and have them think about or verbalize how it feels after that first step is done, that's one way to do it. Will that work for everybody? Absolutely not. But that's one way to start to try.
Absolutely love it. Okay, let's try another example. What about homework? Trying to get a kid start or a teen started on a homework
Yep.
assignment. They just won't get started.
So I have a strategy that I love to teach teenagers called set it up and leave it. So if you're having a hard time getting your teenager to start their homework, try to ask them to just get out all of the materials that they need. So maybe it's their history textbook, maybe it's, their laptop or their pens and notebooks. You can even go as far as to say, like, let's flip to the page that you need to start reading, get everything in order first, and then you can walk away and go take a break or do whatever it is you want to do for a little bit. And the rationale behind doing this is it's kind of the same as when you sit down to a dinner that somebody has made for you and it's all just laid out for you. And the only thing you have to do next is just pick up your fork and eat. So it's kind of a trick for your brain. Like, if everything is already laid out for you, it's ready to go, it's that much easier to just sit down and get the work done. So the set it up and leave it strategy is something I try for homework a lot. I'll give you another one too. One of my favorite strategies for homework is called the Pomodoro technique. And you may have heard of it, but I think it is so powerful that it's worth explaining. So what you do with the Pomodoro technique is you have your teenager set an intention, meaning what is it that you're trying to get done? Let's use that history project again. Okay, your history project. So how long do you think you can work and focus? That answer might be 5 minutes. It might be 10, it might be 20. However small of an amount of time it is, that doesn't matter. We're just trying to get our teenager to pick an amount of time that they can focus. So we've picked the intention, we've picked the amount of time that they think they can focus, and then you have to clear the clutter, which means clear the physical clutter off of your workspace, put your phone away, get everything off of your desk or wherever you're working, and clear your mind. Like, there's clutter in our minds too, right? So maybe it's take a couple deep breaths, maybe it's listen to a 5-minute meditation, maybe it's think of a couple positive affirmations that you say to yourself or mantras, but clear your mind. And then you're going to set that timer for whatever amount of time you decided and work as diligently as you can, even if it's for 10 minutes. And when the timer goes off, then you get to say, okay, like, great job. You can say that to yourself in your head. And you can talk to your teenager about doing some type of either brain break for 5, 10, 15 minutes, or give some type of reward. And it doesn't have to be something that costs money. Maybe their reward is going to get their favorite beverage, from the pantry, or maybe it's let's walk outside with the dog for 20 minutes, some type of brain break that's a reward after they've put in that amount of work. And again, like I said before, sometimes the hardest part is just getting started. So if your teenager can do like one round of Pomodoro, they might feel like they can do a second round, and that would be great. And if not, okay, but at least you kind of got that ball rolling or got them into action mode, and that can be really helpful.
Oh, I love it. It's just so empowering because it gives it all back to them.
Yeah, it's all in their control. And honestly, I use it for myself all of the time. I think my husband is probably so sick of hearing my timer go off, but it's those tasks that I don't want to do, right? Like the ones that I'm procrastinating on or I don't really feel like doing, like, okay, I can do this for 10 minutes. And I set my alarm, and oftentimes I hit it like repeat because I feel like, okay, I can do it again. It's just getting started that is so difficult.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think often the thought of the task is so much worse than the actual task
Yes.
itself.
Yes. I have to admit, that's how I feel about unloading the dishwasher. It's like the worst task in the world to me, right? And loading it is fine. It's the unloading. But I kind of relate this back to my teenagers because we all have tasks we don't enjoy doing or are difficult for us or both. So we have to try to think of some way to add in a little bit of fun or lightheartedness to it. So for me, I'm putting on some music on my Spotify account when I'm unloading the dishwasher. Or I'm putting on the Pioneer Woman because I'm really into her cooking show right now. And I feel like it's something that I can watch, but I don't have to have my eyes glued to the TV, right? But then I even take it a step
Yeah.
further and I think to myself, okay, I'm just doing the coffee mugs. Now I'm just doing the plates. I'm just doing the forks, whatever it may be. And that breaking it down and adding that little element of fun is super helpful. Sometimes when I want my kids to do it, I set the timer and I'm like, who can do it the fastest? So just,
Totally,
figuring out
totally.
whatever you can do to add a little fun or excitement or novelty can make those daunting tasks seem a little bit easier.
I love it. And when our teens are feeling overwhelmed, so when they do set their timer and they do it for a little while, and then they come back, and then suddenly stress starts to build, and they go, I just don't know if I can do this. Any ideas or tips on how we actually get them through those moments of
Yeah,
overwhelm?
I think it's totally important to acknowledge that and know that that is an absolutely normal human response. Take a break. That's totally fine. The work will still be there. But then even have the conversation of what is it that you need to get started? Or what is it that you need to feel better? One of my favorite questions is how do you want to feel about fill in the blank? So let's take that history project again. Let's say it's overwhelming and they try to set their timer and it's just too much and they need to take a break. Fine. How do you want to feel about this history assignment? The answer might be
Mm-hmm.
less stressed, for example. So then we say, what do you need to do to feel less stressed? So you're really acknowledging like how they feel or how they want to feel and helping them make that connection between, okay, you want to feel less stressed. You have control over that. What can we do to help you feel less stressed? They can answer that question typically.
Mm.
And I think that's really
Mm.
powerful because it comes from them and it helps, again, put them into action mode and realize they have some control over that.
Yeah. So, Natalie, when you do ask teens, what can you do to feel less stressed? What are the typical answers you
Yeah.
get for that?
So a lot of times they'll say, I need to not do this right now. That's fine. Or maybe I need to take a break. Or some of them that like have done this work with us for a while, they'll say things like maybe I need an accountability partner. Like maybe they need a friend to work with.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Maybe I need a different location. Maybe the place that they're doing their work is just either distracting or feels monotonous. They need a change of scenery. Sometimes they need to go get some fresh air. Sometimes it's I need to take a 20-minute nap. I need to call a friend. Whatever they need to do, they can do it. I also have teens work a lot on naming their values once we've worked together for a while. And sometimes we pull out that list of values and we say, like, okay, you need to feel less stressed. Let's review your values again. What are the things that are very important to you? Okay. And use that as inspiration to help you decide what action to take.
Oh, I love that. Because then again, we're coming back to heart and soul.
Yes.
It's not because I tell you
No,
to,
and
right?
it can't. It can't be because I told you to. That may work for some people, but for our teens that are resistant to that, or because it just comes from mom and dad, even though it's coming from a good place, sometimes they need a different voice or a different approach.
So connected to "I told you so" or "you have to" is the um, all-pressing question around
Mm-hmm.
consequences. So when our teens just won't do what we've asked them to do, when they keep procrastinating, when they keep starting and stopping work, what is your feelings around consequences? What comes up for you
Yeah.
there?
Honestly, I feel like teenagers, especially if they're over 14, are old enough for natural consequences. So the natural consequence of not getting your work done is you get a poor grade on it or you get a zero. And they might not care in that moment, but as those zeros add up and they're not eligible for sports or they're not maybe getting the rewards that mom and dad have put in place, or maybe they're, for good grades, maybe they're not able to have their privileges that mom and dad have set up that are tied to grades. It's for a lot of my teenagers, it's the phone usage or the use of the car. They will start to see that the natural consequences of not doing whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing will add up and will eventually catch up to them and not feel very good. So I'm honest. I don't pretend to be a parenting coach. I'm not. And I honestly do not have teenagers myself. I just work with them. Mine are littles. But what I believe is that natural consequences are okay for teenagers, especially if they're over 14, 15.
Absolutely. And Natalie, my feeling is that when our kids or our teens are overly resistant, there's usually something else going on. So they're usually anxious or there might be depression. And I think when we come in very heavy handed with consequences, we miss their emotional
Yeah.
experience. So they might do what we need them to do for a couple
Sure.
of months, but we haven't actually dealt with the underlying emotional issue. And so it's like, what is actually happening here? Because we need to figure that out so that you can then move forward in a way that's important to you. Not that's important to mom or to
Yep.
dad, but that's important to you.
Totally agree, because a lot of times the I don't want to do something, either, I'm thinking of a school related assignment, means I don't know where to start, or it's overwhelming, it feels too heavy, I don't really know how to do this, or I'm scared to ask for help. Like, you're right, there's some type of underlying reason. I don't believe that typically teenagers are defiant just to be defiant. There's some type of something getting in the way. And if we can figure that out, you're more likely to be able to solve that problem or get them feeling more confident about what they can do.
So, Natalie, I came across your three
Oh, yeah.
questions, and I would love you to share with our listeners your three questions that you give to your teens before they're about to start on a big new something, whether it's a new semester or a big new project. What are those three
Yeah, I'm
questions?
happy to share those. I use it really often for the start of a new school year, or sometimes the start of, coming back from a long break, or starting on a new, sports team or new club or activity where everything is kind of new. The people you're around, the circumstances you're in. I think it's really important to ask yourself these questions. And the first one is, who do you want to be? Or in other words, how do you want other people to see you? Do you want to be that kid that's always helpful in math class? Do you want to be that girl in the cafeteria that's always cracking jokes and everybody thinks she's funny? How do you want to be seen by others? I think putting some thought into that is really important, because teenagers, like everybody, want to feel included. They want to feel a certain way. And if we can think about, or have them think about, how they want to be seen, it helps to kind of change their thought process and then change their behaviors. Because the second question is then, what do you want to accomplish? Okay, so maybe you have some goals. Maybe it's a certain grade point average. Maybe you want to try out for a sports team that you've been nervous for. Maybe you want to try out for the musical. Whatever it is, what is it that you want to accomplish? And then what do you not want to regret is the third one. So kind of forward thinking. So let's think about this school year that's coming up. How do you want to be seen? What are the things you want to accomplish? And then what do you not want to regret? Because there's nothing worse than kind of looking back on an experience and wishing you had handled it differently, or maybe even had some different opportunities. I will never forget, I wish that I had tried out for the High School Musical. To this day, it hurts my heart that I didn't. And I know I can't sing, okay? I'm going to be honest, but I love musicals, and I kind of wish I would have just tried it. So that's where that question came from, because I know everybody has things they want to try to accomplish in high school, but if we can put words to that and say it out loud, you're that much more likely to actually give it a try.
Oh, I absolutely love that, and I love that we kind of start from the inside out. So, who do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? And then, what don't you want to regret?
Yes.
I think that's absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, Natalie. Before we finish off, anything else when it comes to teens that you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think that if we can help build our teenagers' confidence, there's nothing that they can't do. A lot of parents come to me for some of the outward things like the time management, the organization, the study skills. And I teach that, and that's kind of what I advertise. But there's also this other kind of behind all of that is that confidence piece, that motivation. And so a lot of the work that my team and I do is really about building confidence and helping them to feel motivated. So parents might come to me for one thing, but they're also going to get that other piece because I think that's what's underlying. Not too many people are doing a Google search for how do I boost my team's confidence. A lot of them are looking for how do I help my team get organized? How do I help my team manage their time? And those things are all very important, but it's that underneath piece that I think helps support all of it.
Oh, Natalie, yes, it's almost like if you don't have the engine, how do you do
Yes,
the rest
that's
of
a
it?
great
So
analogy.
you're helping to work on that
Yeah,
engine.
totally
Mm-hmm.
agree.
Mm-hmm. So for our listeners who want to find out more about you, where can they go? What can
Yeah,
they look for?
sure. So our website, it's long, it's a mouthful, but it's www.lifesuccessforteens.com. You can read about who we are and what we do on our website. We're also on Instagram, and that's at Life Success for Teens. And then we have a parent group on Facebook, and that's called Parents Raising Successful Teens. But if you want something kind of tangible that you can look at and use some strategies, I do have a PDF download all about procrastination strategies for your teenagers so you don't have to nag. And that one parents seem to like. So I'm happy to share that one with you as well.
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much for your time
My
today,
absolute
Natalie.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.